It's 2 a.m. on October 26th, 2015, and Trevor's phone lights up in the dark. His sister Evie is calling. He answers, and her voice comes through shaky and desperate. "I'm outside your house," she says. Trevor jumps out of bed and runs to the front door, throwing it open. He looks up and down the street. Nothing. No car, no Evie, nobody. He calls her back immediately. She picks up. "I don't know where I am," she tells him, her voice hollow and distant. Then she says 3 words that will haunt him forever. "I'm gone." The line goes dead. Trevor keeps calling. No answer. But here's what makes this crime case so disturbing. Just 6 hours earlier, Evie was perfectly fine at her grandmother's house, eating ice cream and watching TV. So what happened in those 6 hours? And why would it take 3 years to find out she'd been less than 65 feet away the entire time? Her name was Evie Stephatch. She was 18 years old and lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. To understand what happened to her, you need to know who she was. Evie wasn't your average teenager. She had this incredible gift for languages. While most kids her age were struggling through high school Spanish, Evie taught herself 3 languages completely on her own: Spanish, Turkish, and Hebrew. She didn't just memorize words either. She studied the cultures, learned the correct pronunciations, and understood the rhythm and flow of each language. It was the kind of thing that takes real dedication and intelligence. But Evie was more than just book smart. She had this creative side that came through in everything she did. She loved photography and would spend hours capturing moments that most people wouldn't even notice. A quiet street corner in Little Rock, the way light hit the ocean water, small details that told bigger stories. Nature was her escape, especially the ocean. She felt calm there, at peace. She'd come back from trips and tell her friends all about it with this excitement in her voice that was hard to miss. Evie also expressed herself through her appearance. She experimented with different hairstyles, makeup looks, and fashion choices. Each look was intentional, thought out. It wasn't just about clothes for her, it was about identity, about figuring out who she was. And on her shoulder, she had a tattoo that said, "Each night leads to a brighter day." That line meant something to her. It showed she believed in hope, even when things got dark. She believed things could get better. Family meant everything to Evie. She was close with her grandmother Peggy, who she visited all the time. Her mother Lori and stepfather Michael were important parts of her life. She had siblings too: Trevor, Harris Elizabeth, and Ethan. They all helped raise her, watched her grow up. But here's the thing about Evie that really defined her. She was independent, fiercely independent. She wanted to make her own choices, live life on her own terms, and she was brave. When she saw something wrong, she didn't stay quiet. She believed in justice, in standing up for what was right, even when it was hard, even when it puts her in danger. This is her story. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome. This channel covers real crime cases with the respect and detail they deserve. We don't sensationalize, we don't exaggerate, we just tell the truth. If that's something you care about, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story. And I'm really curious, where are you watching from right now? Seriously, drop your city or country in the comments below. It's always interesting to see how far these cases reach, and how many people want to make sure stories like Evie's don't get forgotten. Alright, now let's get back to Evie and what led to that terrifying phone call at 2 a.m. Evie Stephatch was born on March 31st, 1997, to Lori and Peter Stephatch. Her parents divorced when she was young, and after the split, Evie lived with her mother. But she stayed in touch with her father. The divorce didn't break those connections. She had siblings who were part of her life too. Trevor, Harris Elizabeth, and a half-brother named Ethan. They all played a role in raising her. Her stepfather, Michael Jernigan, came into the picture when he married Lori, and he became an important person in Evie's world. But out of everyone, her grandmother Peggy Holman held a special place. Evie felt safe with her, supported. That relationship mattered more than most people realized. Evie started her education at a private school called Lisa Academy. She did well there. Teachers noticed she worked hard, stayed engaged, and participated in class. She wasn't coasting through. She put in the effort. And she had friends. Real friends. Her best friend was a girl named Danielle. They'd known each other since Lisa Academy, and they were inseparable. They shared everything. Fears, dreams, secrets. The kind of friendship where you don't have to explain yourself because the other person just gets it. That bond was solid for years. Then came the summer of 2015. Evie got her first real job at Foot Locker in McCain Mall. It was a big step for her. Her parents were proud. They saw their daughter taking responsibility, showing drive, proving she could handle independence. At first, everything looked good. She was working, making her own money, figuring out adult life. But then things started to shift. Her parents began noticing changes. Small ones at first. She wasn't around as much. It got harder to reach her. She was meeting new people and the atmosphere around her felt different. Something was changing, and no one could quite put their finger on what it was. When senior year rolled around, Evie made a sudden decision. She transferred from Lisa Academy to Little Rock Central High, a public school. It was an abrupt move, and it caught people off guard. Why leave a private school in your final year? Why switch everything up right before graduation? Her family didn't fight her on it, but they had questions. And that's when the real shift started. Evie began pulling away, not just physically but emotionally. She was guarded now, more distant. The open conversations they used to have stopped happening. She was creating space between herself and the people who'd always been there. Her friend group changed, too. The kids she was hanging out with now were different from the ones at Lisa Academy. They were edgier, more rebellious. They didn't respect authority. They pushed boundaries and broke rules, and they didn't seem to care about the consequences. Evie's family didn't like it. They felt uneasy about these new people in her life, but they didn't intervene directly. They didn't want to push her away even more, so they stayed quiet and hoped it was just a phase. But Danielle noticed it too. Their friendship, the one that had been rock solid for years, started to crack. The closeness faded. Evie didn't want to hang out as much. When they did talk, it felt different. The emotional connection that used to make them best friends was weakening, and Danielle didn't know how to fix it. Around this time, Evie started dating someone. Her family didn't trust him. They didn't like the way he acted, didn't like the influence he had on her. But they kept their concerns quiet. They didn't want to start a fight. Still, the worry was there. They were scared this relationship was going to lead her down a bad path. And their fears weren't unfounded. Evie's behavior kept changing. She stopped going to class regularly. The school contacted her parents about the absences, but when they tried to talk to her about it, she shut them down. She didn't want their input. She didn't want their rules. She wanted to make her own decisions, live her own life. Every conversation about responsibility ended the same way. No resolution, no progress, just frustration on both sides. Her parents lost track of who she was spending time with. They didn't know her new friends. They didn't know where she was going. And even though they were scared, they were losing control. They couldn't force her to do anything. She was almost an adult, and she made that very clear. By the time fall 2015 came around, Evie was barely home. She'd disappear for days at a time. No one knew where she was staying, sometimes with friends, sometimes with her grandmother, sometimes places her family didn't even know about. The girl they knew, the one who worked hard at Lisa Academy and dreamed about the future, felt like a stranger now. What was drawing her toward this new life? What was she looking for that she couldn't find with the people who loved her? No one had answers. And by October, Evie Stephatch was slipping further and further away from everyone who cared about her. October 2015. Evie went to a party. It was the kind of gathering her family had been worried about, the kind thrown by that new crowd she'd been running with. Her best friend Danielle got invited too, but she refused to go. She didn't feel safe around those people. She didn't trust them. So she stayed home. Evie went alone. What happened at that party would set off a chain of events that nobody saw coming. The next morning, Evie showed up at her parents' house. She walked through the door upset, but composed. She wasn't falling apart. She wasn't hysterical. But something was clearly wrong. Her mother Lori and stepfather Michael could see it on her face. Then Evie dropped a bombshell. She told them she'd been attacked the night before, assaulted. She named 4 young men who did it. She was specific. She gave their names without hesitation. And then she said something that made the situation even worse. They recorded it. They filmed the whole thing on a cell phone. Evie wasn't guessing. She was certain. She'd seen the phone. She knew the video existed. But here's what stood out to her stepfather, Michael. Evie wasn't broken. She was angry. She was determined. She looked him in the eye and told him exactly what she planned to do. She was going to the police. She was going to report what happened. She wasn't going to stay quiet. This wasn't a girl who was scared into silence. This was someone who believed in justice, who believed that speaking up mattered. Michael told her he'd take her to the police station. They agreed on a time. Around 8 p.m. that evening. It was set. Evie was going to file a report, name those men, and make sure they faced consequences. Then she left the house. And she never came back. That was the last time her parents saw her in their home. From that point forward, the only way her family heard from Evie was through her grandmother, Peggy. She didn't return to her parents' place. She didn't come back to talk about the assault. In fact, the attack was never mentioned again. Not to her mother, not to her stepfather, not to anyone in her immediate family. That conversation she had that morning was the only time she spoke openly about what happened to her. The plan to go to the police station never materialized. Michael waited that evening, but Evie never showed. No call, no text, no explanation. The trip to report the crime just didn't happen. But Evie didn't stay silent. Later that same day, October 24th, she sent text messages, and the people she texted were the same 4 men she'd accused that morning. The messages were direct. They were confrontational. Evie wasn't playing games. She told them she was going to the police. She told them there was video evidence. She told them they needed to come forward. She wasn't backing down. She was making it clear that she wasn't going to let this go. Those texts put everything out in the open. The men now knew she was planning to report them. They knew she was serious. They knew she had information about the video. Evie was standing her ground, making sure they understood she wasn't going to protect them. But within 24 hours, Evie's stephatch would be gone. Completely gone. Did someone decide they needed to silence her before she could speak to the police? Did those messages make her a target? Did naming those men put her in danger? She had no idea what the next 24 hours would bring. She had no idea that the decision to speak up, to fight back, to demand justice would cost her everything. October 24th, the same day Evie sent those confrontational texts to the men she'd accused, she reached out to her best friend, Danielle. She asked if they could meet up. She mentioned wanting to see her brother, too. Danielle agreed. When they got together, Danielle noticed something right away. Evie was tense. She was guarded in a way that felt off. They spent time together, just hanging out like they used to. At one point, Evie helped Danielle with a piercing. It was a normal thing between friends, but the whole time Evie was quiet. She kept pausing while she talked, like she was holding something back. At one point, she mentioned she was dealing with some trouble. But when Danielle asked what kind of trouble, Evie wouldn't say. She didn't elaborate. She didn't open up. She just left it hanging there, vague and concerning. Danielle didn't push. She could tell Evie wasn't ready to talk about it, but she knew something was wrong. The next morning, October 25th, Evie left Danielle's house and headed to her grandmother Peggy Holman's home. The visit wasn't planned, but that wasn't unusual for Evie. She'd drop by her grandmother's place all the time without warning. Peggy didn't think anything of it. They spent the day together doing ordinary things. They ate ice cream. They watched SpongeBob on TV. It was a completely normal day. Nothing about Evie's mood raised any red flags. She wasn't acting scared. She wasn't acting like someone who was in danger. She was just there, spending time with her grandmother like she always did. Around dinner time, Evie told her grandmother she needed to leave. She said she had to meet her stepfather Michael at 8 p.m. And then she said something important. She reminded her grandmother that she was still planning to go to the police. The plan to report the assault was still on. It wasn't forgotten. It was still happening. Evie hugged her grandparents goodbye. She told them she'd be back soon. Then she walked out the door. She was calm. She was confident. She looked completely at ease. There was no sign that anything was wrong, no hint that she was scared or in trouble. She just left like it was any other day. That was the last time her family saw her alive. But here's where everything goes dark. Between 8 p.m. on October 25th and 2 a.m. on October 26th, there's a 6-hour gap. Nobody knows where E.B. went. Nobody knows what she did. There are no confirmed sightings. No security cameras captured her. No witnesses came forward. Those 6 hours are a complete blank. And in those 6 hours, something happened. Something that would end E.B.'s life. Around 2 a.m. on October 26th, Trevor's phone rang. It was his sister. He answered and heard her voice on the other end, shaky and confused. She told him she was outside his house. Trevor didn't waste time. He jumped up and ran to the front door. He looked outside. Nothing. The street was empty. No car. No E.B. Nobody. He immediately called her back. She picked up. This time, she told him something different. She said she was in her car, but she didn't know where she was. Trevor had never heard her voice sound like that before. She was distant, disoriented, lost. She couldn't tell him where she was parked. She couldn't explain what was happening. Her words didn't make sense. And then she said 3 words that Trevor would never forget. "I'm gone." The call ended. Trevor kept calling her over and over. No answer. The phone just went straight to voicemail. She was gone. But there's more. That same night, E.B. called 911. Not once, but twice. Both calls lasted less than a minute. Whatever she said, whatever she was trying to report, it didn't last long. And here's the problem. No audio recordings of those calls survived. When investigators looked into it later, the police claimed they had no technical records, no logs, no files, nothing. But E.B.'s family confirmed those calls happened. The 911 system registered them. So what was she trying to say? Was she in danger? Was she running from someone? Was she trying to tell the dispatcher where she was? Nobody knows. Those calls are gone. The only evidence that they even existed is the family's word and the brief mention in reports. October 26th morning. E.B.'s parents tried to reach her. They called her phone over and over. At first, it rang. Then it stopped. The phone went dead. That shift told them everything. Something was catastrophically wrong. They didn't wait. They got in the car and drove straight to the police station to file a missing person report. But the police turned them away. They said it was too early. They said there were certain procedures that had to be followed first. They couldn't just file a report because someone didn't answer their phone for a few hours. The officers suggested that E.B. had left on her own. After all, she was 18 years old, legally an adult. She had a history of being independent, of going off on her own for days at a time. To the police, this didn't look like a crime. It looked like a teenager exercising her freedom. But her family knew better. They insisted this was different. Yes, E.B. was independent. Yes, she'd pulled away from them over the past few months. But she stayed in touch. She always let someone know where she was, even if it was just her grandmother. This kind of silence wasn't like her. The total blackout, the panicked phone calls in the middle of the night, the dead phone, it all pointed to something terrible. But the police didn't see it that way. They saw a young woman who probably just needed space. And so the clock started ticking. Hours turned into days. And with every passing moment, the chance of finding E.B. alive got smaller and smaller. October 27th, 2015, 2 days after E.B. vanished. A civilian was driving through an area near Shalom Park in Little Rock when he spotted a car sitting in an empty lot. It was a 2003 Volkswagen Passat, and it had been in the same spot since the day before. He thought it was strange, so he called the police. But no patrol was sent out that night. The next day he drove by again. The car still hadn't moved, so he called the police a second time. An hour later, officers finally showed up. They ran the plates. The car belonged to E.B. Stephatch. When police looked inside, they found the key still in the ignition. The gas tank was completely empty. The battery was dead. The car had clearly been sitting there for a while, but what was inside the car told a much bigger story. Her purse was there, her clothes, her phone, her wallet with her ID and bank card still inside. And there was a contact lens case. That detail matters because E.B. had terrible vision. Without her lenses, she couldn't see. Everything she needed to survive, everything a person would take if they were leaving on their own, was left behind in that car. It didn't make sense. If E.B. had run away, if she'd left voluntarily like the police suggested, why would she leave her phone? Why would she leave her wallet? Why would she leave her contact lenses when she couldn't see without them? But here's what the police didn't do. They didn't put up crime scene tape. They didn't treat the car like a potential crime scene. There was no deep inspection of the vehicle or the area around it. Nobody checked for signs of a struggle. Nobody looked for anything that might explain what happened. And here's another problem. The trunk of the car wasn't properly closed. It was slightly open. That night, a heavy rainstorm rolled through Little Rock. Rain poured into the trunk and soaked everything inside. Documents, clothes, anything that could have been potential evidence got completely waterlogged and destroyed. When E.B.'s parents were eventually given her belongings, everything was ruined, soaked through, damaged beyond repair. So they did what the police should have done from the start. They photographed everything themselves, every single item. They documented it all because they knew how important it was. They were trying to preserve whatever might still be useful. But no forensic team was ever called to examine that car. No fingerprints were collected. No DNA samples were taken. No biological material was analyzed. Basic investigation protocols that should have been automatic were completely ignored. The police treated it like an abandoned vehicle, not like evidence in a missing person case. And while all of this was happening, E.B.'s family was doing the work the police should have been doing. They set up an unofficial command center in their home. They became their own detectives. They made calls, tracked down leads, put together timelines. Every time they reached out to the police, they got short, scripted responses. The kind of answers that don't actually say anything. There was no organized search of Shalom Park. No one went door to door interviewing E.B.'s friends or people in her social circle. No one requested surveillance footage from streets nearby. There was no sense of urgency, no elevated concern. Nothing that indicated the police thought E.B. was in real danger, so her parents did what they could. They posted flyers all over Little Rock. They contacted local media. They called private investigators. But without access to police evidence or databases, their hands were tied. There was only so much they could do. Weeks went by, then months. And with every day that passed, hope faded a little more. E.B.'s father eventually hired a private investigator named Monty Vickers. Vickers started digging into the case, and one of the first things he looked at were E.B.'s last text messages. The ones she sent to the 4 men she'd accused of attacking her. The messages were direct and confrontational. "I'm going to the police. There's video evidence. You need to come forward." Vickers brought this to the attention of the police. He pointed out the obvious. If E.B. threatened to expose these men, if she was planning to report them and had evidence to back it up, that gave them a direct motive to silence her. If she threatened to expose them, would they really just let her talk? But the police didn't issue warrants for the men's phones. They didn't do any forensic examination of digital communications. No one looked into who those men were texting or calling in the hours after E.B. sent those messages. The authorities claimed there was insufficient cause to go after their phones. The men were interviewed, yes, but only as witnesses, not as suspects. And after those initial interviews, there was no follow-up, not for 3 years. Monty Vickers kept pointing out the systemic failures in this case, the lack of urgency, the bureaucratic inertia, the complete absence of any real investigation strategy. But nothing changed. The case just sat there, stagnant, going nowhere. But remember that park where E.B.'s car was found? There was something there all along. In the spring of 2016, a woman named Margie Foley went back to Shalom Park. Margie was the mother of one of E.B.'s friends, and something about that location had been bothering her. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to that spot than anyone realized. So she walked over to the area where E.B.'s car had been discovered. Just a few steps away from the parking spot, there was a large concrete drainage pipe. It went underground, and Margie started walking toward it. As she got closer, she was hit by an overwhelming smell. It was sharp, unmistakable, the smell of decay. She knew immediately that something was wrong. This wasn't normal. She pulled out her phone and called the police right away. An officer arrived within an hour. Margie pointed directly at the drainage pipe and described the smell. She was clear about it. This wasn't just trash or standing water. This was something else. But the officer dismissed her concerns. He told her that storm drains in public parks get clogged all the time with trash and organic matter, especially after heavy rain. He said the smell was normal. Nothing suspicious about it. Margie didn't back down. She insisted that this was different. The smell was sickly sweet, the kind of smell that only comes from one thing. She suggested he use a flashlight and look inside the pipe. She even suggested calling a K9 unit to check it out, but the officer refused. He said he didn't see any signs of a crime. There was no reason to investigate further. Then he left. He walked away without ever looking inside that pipe. No report was filed. No follow-up agency was called. Nothing. That drainage pipe was less than 65 feet from where Eby's car had been sitting. All it would have taken was one look inside. One quick check with a flashlight. That's it. But it didn't happen. Another devastating missed opportunity. Another chance to find Eby that slipped away because someone didn't take it seriously. The months kept going by. No leads, no answers, no movement on the case. It went cold. Nearly 8 months passed before anything changed. It took relentless public pressure and Eby's parents refusing to give up before the case was finally reclassified. Eby was officially declared a missing person and a full investigation was authorized. But by then, the trail was ice cold. Witnesses were gone. Memories had faded. Evidence had been destroyed. Any real chance of finding out the truth was likely gone forever. Fall 2018, 3 years after Eby disappeared. The police finally decided to properly search Shalom Park. And this time, they focused on that concrete drainage pipe. The same one Margie Foley had reported back in the spring of 2016. The same one an officer had dismissed without even looking inside. The same pipe that had been sitting there less than 65 feet from where Eby's car was found the entire time. Officers approached the pipe and looked inside. What they found were human remains. Skeletal remains. A preliminary examination confirmed they belonged to a female. Within days, the identification came back positive. It was Eby Stephatch. She'd been there the entire time, just steps away from where her car had been discovered back in October 2015, in the same park that police had visited multiple times over the years, right next to the exact spot that Margie Foley had pointed out in 2016, the spot an officer had walked away from without investigating. 3 years. Eby was 65 feet away for 3 years, while her family posted flyers, while they gave interviews, while they begged for help, while they wondered if she was alive somewhere. She was right there, in that park, in that pipe, the whole time. The medical examiner's report came back with limited information. The remains showed severe decomposition from time and exposure to the elements. 3 years inside a drainage pipe had taken its toll. The examiner was unable to determine a specific cause of death. There wasn't enough left to conduct a full forensic analysis. The condition of the remains made it nearly impossible to extract the kind of details investigators needed. But there was one conclusion the medical examiner reached with absolute certainty. This was a homicide. Eby's body had been deliberately placed inside that pipe. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't someone who crawled in there and got stuck. Someone put her there. Someone hid her body in that drainage pipe, hoping it would never be found. But the decomposition meant something else, too. There were no defensive wounds identified, no biological evidence that could point to a suspect, no DNA under fingernails, no fibers or hair that didn't belong to her. Nothing that could tell investigators who did this. 3 years of rain, heat, cold, and decay had erased it all. Every piece of physical evidence that might have solved this crime was gone. What could have been found if they'd looked in 2015? What if officers had searched that pipe the same week Eby's car was discovered? What about 2016, when Margie Foley stood there and told an officer she smelled decay? What if he'd listened? What if he'd taken her seriously and looked inside? If that pipe had been searched when Eby's car was first found, her body would have been in far better condition. Forensic experts could have analyzed it properly. They could have determined the cause of death. They could have collected evidence, DNA, fibers, anything that might have been on her body or clothing. Suspects could have been identified. People could have been questioned while memories were fresh. Digital records could have been pulled before they got deleted. If the officer in 2016 had taken Margie's warning seriously, there still would have been time. Evidence might still have been recoverable. Justice might have been possible. But instead, 3 years of decomposition erased everything. Every clue, every lead, every chance of finding out exactly what happened to Eby Stepatch and who was responsible for her death. The case was officially ruled a homicide. Eby Stepatch's death was confirmed as a murder. But even with that ruling, the investigation stalled again. No suspects were identified, no charges were filed, no clear explanation of what happened to Eby that night was ever established. The 4 men Eby named in her final text messages, the ones she accused of attacking her, the ones she told she was going to the police, were never brought in as suspects. After the initial interviews back in 2015, they were never questioned again. Their phones were never examined. Investigators never pulled their call logs, their text messages, their location data. Their whereabouts on the night Eby disappeared were never thoroughly investigated. The police had names. They had a motive. They had direct accusations from the victim herself. But nothing happened. Eby's family kept reaching out to authorities, asking for updates, asking for answers. All they got back was silence. There was no physical evidence left after 3 years of decomposition. There was no access to crucial digital messages that could have told the story of what happened. There was no forensic timeline that could place anyone at the scene. The investigation was effectively over. Any hope of a courtroom trial was gone. No one could be held accountable. The case file said homicide, but there would be no arrest, no jury, no verdict, just an open case that would sit on a shelf gathering dust. But Eby's mother, Lori Jernigan, refused to let her daughter be forgotten. She went public. She made national media appearances, telling Eby's story to anyone who would listen. She sat down for an emotional interview on Dr. Phil, breaking down as she talked about the daughter she lost and the justice she couldn't get. The family put together a $50,000 reward for any information that could lead to an arrest. That money came from private citizens, donors, and nonprofit organizations who believed Eby deserved better. $50,000 for anyone willing to come forward with information. But still, no one came forward. Either people genuinely didn't know what happened, or fear and loyalty kept them silent. Maybe they were scared of retaliation. Maybe they didn't want to betray someone they knew. Whatever the reason, nobody talked. Eby's story started spreading beyond Little Rock. Podcasts picked it up. YouTube channels covered it. Independent documentaries told her story. The true crime community kept her memory alive, making sure people knew her name, knew what happened to her, knew how badly the system failed her. But officially, there was no response. The case stayed cold. The men Eby named in those final texts kept living their lives. Some of them have families now, jobs, normal lives. They walk around free. Meanwhile, Eby's family and friends are left without her, still grieving, still waiting for answers that may never come. They're stuck with nothing but unanswered questions and the knowledge that someone out there knows exactly what happened, but will never face consequences. How does a case with clear suspects, direct accusations, and obvious motive end with zero accountability? How does a victim name her attackers, threaten to go to the police, disappear within 24 hours, and nobody gets charged? The harsh truth is this: suspicion isn't proof. You can suspect someone all you want. You can believe with every fiber of your being that you know who did it. But without hard evidence, without physical proof that can stand up in court, there are no charges, no trial, no conviction, no justice. Just the brutal reality that everyone can see the truth, but no one can prove it in a way that matters legally. And that's where Eby Stepatch's case stands today. A homicide with no killer, a crime with no justice, a family with no closure. E.B. Stephatch's case teaches some devastating lessons about what happens when victims speak up and nobody listens, about police accountability when investigations fail from the very beginning, about the human cost of negligence and missed opportunities, about what happens when the systems that are supposed to protect us simply don't do their job. Her story matters for one critical reason. E.B. named her attackers. She told her family exactly who hurt her. She sent text messages directly to those men, telling them she was going to the police. She tried to report them. She did everything right. She spoke up. She refused to stay silent. She fought back. And she still didn't get justice. E.B. was an intelligent, independent, brave young woman who believed in standing up for what was right. She had a tattoo on her shoulder that said, "Each night leads to a brighter day." That line meant something to her. It showed she believed in hope even when things got dark. She believed that truth would win in the end. She believed that doing the right thing mattered. Her family continues fighting to make sure her story isn't forgotten. They keep her memory alive because they know that if people stop talking about E.B., if her case fades into the background, then there's no chance justice will ever come. So here's the question. If E.B. had been taken seriously from the start, if that drainage pipe had been searched in 2015 when her car was found, or in 2016 when Margie Foley reported the smell, would E.B. have gotten justice? Would investigators have found evidence that could have led to arrests? Would her family have closure today? What do you think went wrong here? Was it lack of training? Was it negligence? Was it just not caring enough about an 18-year-old girl who didn't fit the perfect victim narrative? Let us know what you think in the comments below. E.B. Stephatch's story deserves to be heard. Cases like this can't be forgotten just because the system failed. Your support, your engagement, your willingness to share these stories, that's what keeps them alive. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications. We cover cases like E.B.'s every week, cases that need attention, cases where justice hasn't been served. Your subscription matters more than you think. And listen, the next case we're covering is going to hit you hard. A college student goes missing after a night out with friends. Her boyfriend's story doesn't add up, and what investigators found when they finally started digging shocked an entire community. You're not going to want to miss it. Click the video on your screen right now to watch it. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to E.B.'s story. And as always, stay safe out there.